Hey, Rachel, are you back with us?
I'm here, thanks.
Okay, we'll get going in about 1 minute, just letting some
Okay,
folks still trickle in.
take your time, thanks.
All right, let's get started. Thanks for being here, everyone. Welcome to the first EOU New Nature Writing Series event of 2026. I'm Nick Neely, and I'm the director of EOU's low residency MFA program in creative writing, which has a special concentration in landscape, ecology, and community. I'm also teaching intro to poetry this term and very excited to have some poetry students at EOU here with us in the audience. Dovetailing with our annual summer New Nature Writing Con, this hybrid online in-person reading and conversation series highlights books and authors that are pushing the boundaries of eco-writing broadly construed in the Northwest and beyond. We aim to both honor and reimagine quote unquote nature writing by seeking out inclusive, hybrid, interdisciplinary, and forward-thinking work. The series is also devoted to the craft of writing more generally, so something in it for everyone, I hope. Today, there's a good group of us here in Lewis Auditorium in Zabel Hall on EOU's campus, others watching online. And we welcome poet Rachel Richardson, who's beaming in from California to read from and talk about her latest book, Smother, which I'll hold up. It's out from Norden last year, and it's really a terrific read. Rachel is the author of 2 additional books of poetry, 100-Year Wave and Copperhead, both selections in the Carnegie Mellon Poetry Series, and she's the recipient of an NEA, National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, and a Wallace Stegner Fellowship at Stanford. Her poetry and prose have appeared in the New York Times, the Atlantic, the American Poetry Review, and many other great places. She's taught at a number of universities, most recently as a distinguished visiting writer at St. Mary's College of California. In 2024, she was named an inaugural Artists in Fire resident through the Confluence Lab, and she is now trained as a wildland firefighter, which we should ask her about. She lives in Berkeley, California. Here's how the publisher describes Smother. In this searching, defiant collection, poet Rachel Richardson takes up the existential losses of climate change and insists on the work of survival. How should we raise our children in and for a world that is burning? Richardson interrogates this impossible question. The poet, raising young daughters and grieving the death of a mother friend, documents a string of record-breaking fires across the California landscape and the rage, sorrow, and detachment that follow amidst the pervasive smoke. Environmental and physical predation on the earth and on the female body weave through the book in layers. But these are not poems of giving up. The poems in Smother gather accomplices in grief and mothering, seek out guides and girlfriends, remember the dead, keep watch at the fire breaks, and plant new trees on the burned scars. From lyric forms to moments of prose and documentary collage, these poems sing their song of resistance made from the music that is available to us now. Rachel's going to read from the book for 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'll have some questions for her. And then we will welcome questions from the audience in the room. Rachel, thanks so, I guess I should look this way. Thanks so much for being here. It's a pleasure to host you in this way. Take it from here.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, Nick. And hi to all of you in the classroom and anybody who is online with us too. I'm really glad to be with you. And I can kind of see you, your backs. So I'm glad to be among you today. I'm coming to you from Berkeley, California, which is where I live. And that's sort of relevant to my book in that I'm from Berkeley. I grew up there. I was born there and I lived there until college when I left.
Rachel, turn on your camera.
My camera is on.
Oh,
I can see myself. Okay.
Keep going.
Do you have me now? Or you're gonna figure it out? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well you can just listen and then Suno will be, oh, there we go. Hello. Okay, so I grew up in Berkeley, California. I lived there until I was 18. I left for about 18 years. I went to college and did some other things for a while, and then I came back in my mid 30s. And at that point, I started raising kids in California. So I have these in the same place, actually, in Berkeley and in the same neighborhood. So I have these two experiences of living in this place. And what has the experience that I've had and the experience that's sort of described in this book is that there's a weird kind of double vision that I started to have living in the same place that I had grown up in, but seeing that it was very different ecologically now. And so the things that I had had as a child, the things that I could rely on, the things that meant it was spring now, or that marked the changes of the seasons and ways that I played outside weren't really available to my kids in the same way. Particularly because in the last 10 years, we've started having these like sequences of mega fires rolling through, which those of you in Oregon have experienced some of these too, that are just nothing like what existed in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up. Or if you had a fire like that, it was a complete anomaly. And it started being that it was every summer from 2016 or so to 17 to 22 or 3, we had just back-to-back fires. So this book ended up being sort of about that experience and the weirdness of really being able to see and document the change in climate because it was in this exact place that I had had an earlier experience of a very different kind of place. So that's what this book begins with, or deals with. And it's written over like 7 or 8 years of living here and parenting here and kind of coming to understand this landscape in a new way. So I'm going to start with the poem Creek Fire, which is the first poem in the book. And it tries to get at the sort of surprise of fire and how one of the immediate instincts when there's a fire, and it's not coming for you, right? Like it's a fire in the distance, but but smoke is there, and it feels apocalyptic, and it feels like an emergency, but it's not an emergency you can run from. Like you're not going to evacuate this fire. One of the things that is I always found very strange about it was that you would try to. I feel like the people on the West Coast were always trying to communicate that to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world did not get it. So this fire was in 2020. There's actually a number of different fires. The Creek Fire was one of them. And the confluence of all this smoke that was gathering over Northern California pushed over the Bay Area and made it so that UV rays could not come through. And so in the morning, it just didn't get light. And the entire day, it was pretty dark and the sky was orange. And that image finally made it to like the New York Times, and the kind of the newspapers around the world and images all over, social media and stuff. It finally like got people's attention. But I felt like, it took like a really visual image to get anybody to understand kind of what this felt. And even then it's really hard to explain, if you're not there, what it feels like. So technology kind of comes into the poems a lot because that was how we were trying to sort of talk about what was happening to us. Creek Fire. The dark comes in on my girl's 10th birthday. Fire bearing crow feathers. No ash. It comes with its big breath, sun without light, cold morning in the surrounding counties, everyone blinking, looking around, phones lifted to the horizon. So I'm trying in this book, I think, to get at what I experienced, but I'm not so interested in me individually anymore in this book. I mean, in previous books, I wrote a lot of poems with an I that felt like important and strong, like this is about me and my life. In this book, I was much more interested in what is happening to all of us, what is happening to my community, like the small community, my neighborhood, the other moms and their kids, what's happening to us when the schools close down, when COVID happens, when the smoke is, getting into our lungs, all of these things that kept coming at us. What is happening in our country? What is, all of these different sort of communities that I'm part of. And so there's a lot of we's in the book. You might notice that. So this poem is called Mother Cento, and I'm trying to so a cento is a poem that is a collage of other people's lines, other poets' lines. You're not writing your own lines. You're just finding lines that are interesting to you and arranging them in a way to make a new poem. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to get a bunch of other people's voices on the page talking about and thinking about the idea of motherhood with me, because I was feeling like it had been something I had been told not to write about. And I wanted to kind of gather up my forces and say, like, no, this is a valid subject. It's actually an interesting position from which to write about. So this poem is called Mother Cento. My mother is a moon out to sea. It's summer. She's tired. No one knows where she's been. I wanted to be a good mother, the mother says. Machine of the mother, white city inside her. Mother, we must take away the phone because who will you call next? My mother would be a falconress. My mother was the clouded overnight a moon swims through. She held the beginning of life. Whatever she was to me, she was the human caught in something she could hardly stand. She got us almost through the high grass, then seemed like she turned around and ran right back in. Here's another poem about how technology comes into our experience of nature, and especially the phones, right? Like you can get sort of minute by minute information, which might not actually be good for us or helpful, but it's a way that we exert some kind of control over these situations that feel like we can't control them. So this poem is called Tamarack Fire. And it's about a fire that wasn't actually a huge fire, but it was burning fairly close to the place where my kids were in summer camp, up in the Sierras, in a rustic kind of cabin summer camp. Tamarack Fire. I upload again and again the little circles on the map representing their air, my children in their tents, cursing when red turns to purple, praying to the God I pray to, which is no God, which is the vast smoky sky, for orange, then yellow. Let me be so bold as to pray for green. Children in their tents are not a metaphor. The fire burning 30 miles away is not a metaphor. What will reach them and what will not reach them is not the question. I am 150 miles away, 3 hours, 18 minutes drive time in current traffic. I sit, then stand, then sit. They're probably in the rec hall now playing board games so as not to tax their lungs. The fire was not considered a danger when it ignited on a rocky hilltop, and so it was left to burn. Wind, heat, the big empty sky drew a path into the forest. So if you grew up watching Disney or Pixar movies, you might recognize this phrase, this concept, or if you know anything about how they're made. There's one moment early in the movie where the heroine or hero is supposed to sing a song in which they like identify what they want, right? And then that's how you know like what's going to happen next in the movie. It's like the Little Mermaid wants to have 2 legs to walk on, right? Like, I want to walk in the world. And she has that moment of saying it, and then we know, where it's going. So I learned that from living close to Pixar and people who work there. So this is called the I Want song. I just want them to stop emailing, all of them, you, the bots. I want the kids to stop whining, the floor to sweep itself, the sun to rise blamelessly into the sky. In every movie my kids love, the main character gets to turn, look into the camera, and howl her I Want song straight into our chests. The writers even call it that. I want love, want to walk on 2 feet, want to see the world. And yes, I want to be queen. And once it's been laid out for all of us to hear, we know she has to get it. But there's so much that I want for the trees not to burn, or at least not these trees, not unless they're far away or beneficial to the understory. I want to stop feeling like I'd better buy the fruit now, because maybe next year there will be no more fruit, no more water. Maybe the crops will burn or wither or be sprayed with the chemical that kills the bees, and which studies now show kills the bees' children and children's children 2 bee generations after exposure. I want not to think about the expiration of the world. I want to delete my profile, want pollination of the blossom and the swelling of fruit. I want to stand inside the fog, socked in under a crown of redwoods, and then to become the fog. So if you read this book in your class, you might have noticed that there's a section, the second section of the book is mostly poems to a particular friend, particular person. And that's the one moment in the book where I go much more sort of personal and inward. And they're elegy poems to my friend Nina, who died as a young parent at the age of 39. And that was what I thought I was writing about when I started this book. I thought it was just a series of elegy poems. I thought I was writing about my friendship with her. And then all this smoke kept sort of rolling in, and it changed my subject a lot. But she was one of the kind of catalysts for the book, and made me think, I want to write about the community of parenting kids, and of parents and children, and how we think about the future now. And I came to, after I sort of wrote through my grief over my friend, I came to, as I was finishing this book, this idea of this like real gratitude towards my friends who are alive and who are out there doing good work in other places, particularly maybe during COVID, when I got back in touch with a lot of people who I hadn't been in touch with, and it felt so important to know that they were out there when we were all isolated in our little smaller communities. So I started writing these kind of love poems to them, and I'll read you one of them. This is called Girlfriend Poem, Know Me. And the title Girlfriend Poem comes from another poet who I love and who taught me a lot about poetry, C.D. Wright, who's another great, interesting environmental poet, sort of pushing that boundary too. And she had a series of poems called Girlfriend Poems. So I borrowed that title from her. And this is a poem kind of about college, actually. This is one of my college friends. And so it's about that sort of early life that we had together. Girlfriend Poem, Know Me. It's the tree I can't get over. Salvaged Christmas tree someone hauled in January, still up mid-March in a cabin in Vermont, a demure circle of needles shed to the floor. No one thought to move it, all of us swishing past with backpacks, pizza boxes, me with my mixtapes stacked against the windowsill, loving a throwback even then. And the earth outside taking its cues from the crocuses, the thaw beginning far below the snow. Once we saw a bear scuttle up a tree in the neighborhood, and it took us 3 minutes to turn to each other and say, "That was a bear?" What I loved about the mixtape was how the order of its songs became a message, and wherever it cut off was where the story had to end. Instrumental, interlude, or middle of a sentence. You were mine among wood smoke and calculus homework. Someone else's spilled under the couch like a paper river. Among cowboy hats, let's have a sleepover, symmetry of bodies. Are you going to put this in a poem? Girl in snow boots, girl in sequins. My new philosophy is everything goes in a poem. And one day our roommates dragged that tree into the woods and lit it. Galaxy of sparks in the dark forest, our breath steaming as we circled the flames, smoke tumbling into messages we couldn't read or look away from. So I came back to the idea of the cento one more time in this book when I was coming near the end and thinking about how it seemed like what had happened in my writing was that smoke just did what it does in the world, which is it sort of got into everything. Like I hadn't intended to write about it, but smoke just kept finding its way into my poems. And so I thought it was kind of a funny exercise to think about how smoke pervades the world, pervades our thoughts. And I mean, it's even when it goes away, we don't see it anymore. It's gotten into the soil, right? It's gotten into the water. Those particles are going to be with us for a long time. And so I thought, well, it's kind of in my canon too, like my words, my language, my literary the influences. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to try writing a cento. So again, these like collaged lines of famous lines from poets that you might know, and alter them a little bit to let the smoke in. So I took out the central noun basically in every one of these lines and replaced it with smoke. So smoke has kind of entered American poetics, which I don't know, it was sort of an exercise, but it became kind of a sound poem that I liked. So Smoke Cento. The smoke wades through black jade. Smoke knows why the caged bird sings. Everyone forgets the smoke also flew. The smoke too sings America. The smoke is elegy to what it signifies. Smoke is the thing with feathers. Smoke loved the earth so much she wanted to stay forever. The smoke diverged in a yellow wood. Smoke kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow. But I know too that the smoke is involved in what I know. So I think I'll read you one more and then maybe Nick and I can talk, or you and I, all of us can talk. This poem is called Despite. And in keeping with this idea of like the community and pulling words from that sort of series, the whole bunch of influences that have gotten into my head. This is a poem that began as an exercise to write in response to a series of other poems that had all been kind of written in response to each other, that originated from this poem called Things I Never Knew I Loved by Nazim Hikmet. And then Frank O'Hara also wrote a sort of similar poem. And then a bunch of other contemporary poets have written responses to that poem. So Roger Reeves, Ocean Vuong, Dean Rader, and then I added another influence, C.D. Wright. So I'm responding to all of those poets and to this idea of the poem of kind of listing things that one loves and that one didn't realize one loved. Despite. Today, I love everything. The packed up pack by the door, the dry mountain, the air I don't understand. Oh, this is a poem that takes place in Oregon, by the way. So this is your landscape more than mine. It's and I was in Ashland when I wrote it, and it was so surprising to me how dry the air was. Very different than like coastal California. So I'll begin again. Today, I love everything. The packed up pack by the door, the dry mountain, the air I don't understand. It's an open blueness, crisp, as if mouths had never breathed into it, only trees breathed out. The silk underbark of the manzanitas gleams after fire, the grasses first to return to green. They lay a carpet. Everyone says this. Even in a silent house, I hear everyone saying this. Today, I started with a poet's poem that had derived its love from 4 others, as if we all need someone else's declaration to find our own selves. No, today I started with the sun. My skin here would become like the manzanitas. I'd grow into myself. I'd accept my trunk like Daphne. I'd learn to stretch in it, be peeled back by flame, smolder, lift my scent in the rains. The smell of the wind is what I am after. I don't mind hearing the highway behind it. Today I love everything. The silk of my dry hair blowing, the pickup truck on the ridge. The sun hasn't reached my feet. I like the way the trail is carved right to the edge of the hillside, so I can feel I might tumble off at any step. And the poison oak, glossy from the rain, parades its beautiful leaves toward my ankles. Of all of us, it knows most firmly what it loves. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. It's beautifully read. I thought we could pick up right there in which you bring up poison oak. I'm from California, so I'm bound to have special affection for some of the menaces and this But poison oak, right? We think of it as toxic, uh, glossy, itch-inducing, but also incredibly beautiful. A lot of this book seems to be wrestling with beauty and what's also terrible.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe that is to some extent, what poetry does. But were you thinking about that particular tension when it comes to the subject of fire, right? Which people tend to see as disaster, right? But smoke, these natural elements, which are dangerous, are made quite beautiful in the book. I wonder if you could speak about that a little bit initially.
Sure. And well, this seems to be, I was sort of laughing because this is a tendency I have to name my books after something that is beautiful and will kill you. So my first book is called Copperhead, which is the most dangerous viper in the US. And my second one was called 100-Year Wave, which is the wave that is like way bigger than the normal sea state around it, and the one that will kill you. Basically the tsunami wave. Yeah, I'm drawn to that. I'm drawn to the power of, smoke and fire is so mesmerizing to look at. It is so beautiful. It's way more complicated than we realize from afar. I mean, once you start looking at it, you realize so things burn very differently. It behaves really differently in different weather and different kinds of, terrain. And it's actually quite a fascinating thing to learn about and explore. So yeah, I think I'm drawn to those things that are both maybe maligned, and I want to rescue them by being interested in them, but also beautiful and powerful, right? That power is danger, but it's also beauty. And so I think there's always something interesting to explore in a poem when you have a complex feeling towards something. If you just love it, if it's just cute or something, like that's a simple feeling. But if you are awed and a little terrified by it, that's interesting.
Thank you. Yeah. So your next book will be about earthquakes or maybe something.
I don't know. I think I might actually be sticking with fire a little longer because I did this firefighter training and this study of prescribed fire after finishing this book, in part because I wanted to kind of repair my relationship with fire, because I felt like I've only experienced it as a victim. Either the fire is actually evacuating us, or threatening a place that we love and we've spent time in or something, or where people I know live, or it's far enough away that it's not like in my neighborhood, but the smoke feels like this dangerous presence. But it's really, fire is a natural part of the California landscape and the whole West, right? We live in fire ecology, in places that are supposed to burn and have for tens of thousands of years. But our human involvement with them and our human relationship to them has changed that system and changed that balance. Which is fire suppression policy, which is climate change, heating and drying the landscapes, and changing what is there, and which is people moving into, delicate ecological areas and now having houses there that now we try to protect in a fire. So, we've changed the landscape, and it's our relationship to it that has caused the condition of megafires, really. And so I think we need to get right with that. We need to change that relationship if we're going to, in order to continue to live here. And there are ways to do that. And one of them is prescribed fire. I mean, the biggest one, which is how people who lived here, the indigenous people who lived here for thousands of years, until 1850, that is what they were doing. So we know how to do it. And it's really exciting to learn about. So anyway, that I think I'm sticking with the subject for a while longer, and thinking about the other half of fire, which is the intentional fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can feel some of that understanding underneath these poems, but a lot of the topics you just mentioned don't bubble up through them yet. So I can totally see how there's going to be a sequel.
It might not be. I don't know. It might not be in poetry.
Oh, okay.
I don't know yet, or it might be like a single long poem, or I kind of keep feeling like it should be sort of more documentary. I'm not sure what I should make with it, but
well,
yeah, I just need to be out in the field and explore.
Awesome. Take us with you. I think but maybe that's a good segue into this question. And some of the poems here, right? I have a background more in nonfiction, and sometimes dabble in lyric essay. And you could call some of these things, especially the longer poems that are written not in lines per se, but in paragraphs and sentences that aren't jammed, and that they're highly poetic because they're braided, right? And you're making these leaps. How are you thinking about those, or did they just kind of emerge naturally? I mean, no reason to sort of overthink genre, right? As you're writing, but in the mix, there's an incredible range in the book. So maybe you could take up those two things, sort of writing prose in a poetry book, and also how you're thinking about the breadth of types of poems.
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're looking at Caldor Fire and maybe Fishbowl, and maybe that middle poem, Smother. When you ask that question, and and a couple others. I think part of part of that shift for me, and because I don't really have prose poems in previous books, so this is kind of a move for me towards prose. And part of it is that I wanted to write about other people more, and I wanted to write about myself in community more, and that just kept lending itself to like a language of conversation rather than like a lyric line. And so I think I wanted some kind of plain spokenness in it, in those poems. And also a lot of it is like reporting, like there's some reporting of the news and things that are happening, that like information that's coming in. And I didn't want to sort of stylize that with lines. I just wanted it to feel very kind of direct and declarative. So I think that was some of that instinct in those poems. But in general, yeah, I think I'm moving towards kind of a hybrid thing. I was telling people that this might not end up being a book of poems, but then it did. So I never quite know what it's going to be until it starts coming together. But I wrote a lot of these in the notebook, and I wrote a lot of them like during the thing that was happening. So as we were driving home from Yosemite, I'm writing about what we're passing on the road, or as we're doing this tree planting project, I'm like taking notes on what kinds of trees they are that we're planting, and what's happening there. So it felt very much like this is not like the poet in her sort of quiet, private place. This is the poet out there like with a shovel among a bunch of people, and like in a conversation that's ongoing. So I think that maybe also led me toward the prose line, that it felt well, I mean, these are written in notebooks without like line breaks, without thinking of them being poems. They were just sort of journal entries of what was happening. So I think that's probably how that ended up, how they ended up that way on the page, is that they have that origin, and I'm interested in like having them feel accessible and feel like sort of direct report.
Yeah, I mean, the book, I think, totally integrates from the very lyrical to the more plain spoken, as you say. And I think it's just an impressive range. So it's interesting to hear you say that you wrote these sort of in the interstices of like stolen moments, and so you conceive of yourself as a poet journalist. Let's talk about like the project book, because this book, I mean, there are other, you see topical books, but this one is very topical. Fire, parenting, sort of the dominant subjects, with other themes like development, disease, friendship underneath. I was really interested to hear that the smoke and the fire kind of crept in. I would have thought that's where you started.
Yeah, it was not.
Talk about some of the challenges of like leaning into a themed collection. When did you know that, like, oh, okay, fire is the subject here? What kind of sort of opportunities does that open up in terms of sparking creativity or generating new work to fill gaps, or be in conversation with other work? Does it take over? Is it kind of all consuming? what's it like to know you? Oh, this is a book about this, and I'm going to write about that.
um, I have always written books that feel cohesive in that way. I find that it's good for momentum for me. I like to have my mind come back to, to sort of dig into a single subject from a bunch of different angles. Maybe also there's like the tyranny of the blank page every morning that is probably heightened for poets more than anybody else because we have such short pieces of work, right? So if every day I have to like come to the page with, or come to the blank page at my desk with no subject, and I have to sort of remake the world every day. Like, now what am I going to write about? I don't know. I can't imagine doing it. It's so hard. Once you're in a book, once you're in a project, you at least know sort of what your components are, what your landscape is, and then you can explore it from a bunch of different sides, or you can sort of veer off into something else and see if it'll connect back. But you have something to sort of hold your whole thing together, and to keep you kind of focused as a writer every day on like something that you're like chipping away at, right? Some piece of rock. So there's that. I think just as a practice, it's easier for me to have a sense of my subject. But that said, like, I don't always know what that subject is for years. I think I know what it is, but I might be wrong. My conscious mind needs that subject to have something to know that I'm writing about. But then my subconscious is also getting in there, and images pop in that I didn't expect to write about. I didn't know would be there. They just happen to be, in the air that day or whatever. And I think when you're writing and when you're receptive to that, your subconscious is doing a lot of associating, and you don't have to know, what it's for yet. You just have to write it out. And then I think the work is revealed to you maybe more slowly than more slowly than to other people. Like if other people saw it on the page, a draft of this when I was, 30 poems in or something, they might have said like, you're writing about fire. But I might not have known that yet, even then. I feel like sometimes I'm the last one to understand what my work is even about. Yeah, I mean, I really have come to believe that that's the process, and that's okay. I don't beat myself up for it or try to control too much. I run with it if I think I have a topic, but if something else comes up through that topic, then I let it change. So yeah, I thought I was first writing about my friend who had died and motherhood and friendship through that. And then the fire started happening, and then C.D. Wright died, who was a poet who I had loved and not known personally, but I had loved her work. She died around the same time. So then I thought, I'm kind of writing about that loss too, this like literary loss, right? This loss of a voice that I've heard in my head for a long time, which also feels like a grief, but it's different, right? Because I don't know her in person. Mm-hmm. And then I was listening to her friends mourning her, other poets who were writing about her and her loss, and thinking, oh yeah, we're all in this sort of community of feeling these things together. That I think started me thinking about from that really private personal layer to the larger community layer. Those things are both happening at once always. And I'm experiencing my individual thing that is affected by my demographic group, my physical location, my whatever, but everybody's experiencing some version of this. And then COVID showed us that was true, all across the world, right? Like everybody's experiencing some version of this. It might feel really different for you than for me, but we're all in this mess, together, all in this like situation. So that became part of the subject too, that I was just sort of receptive to the possibilities of what other layers are there in this story.
It really is a layered book. It's like sort of a complete picture of preoccupation, right? From across scales, landscape scale, and then the very personal and
and I live too in like the epicenter of technology, right? I live in the Bay Area, right next to Silicon Valley. So people love tech here. So many people, well, love, hate, whatever, but we are very aware of it and influenced by it. So many people I know work for it. And I have a complicated relationship with it, but it feels very pervasive here, in a way that it is in all of our society, but like personal here. And so technology too was something that was changing really fast across the like 2017 to 23 kind of period, especially once COVID happened, right? We all went sort of online and all these new possibilities for connection sprang up, like Zoom. And so I think that's part of it too, that like I have lived my little tiny life, but I'm also posting it on social media, right? Like I have my world, but I'm also looking at what all these other versions of that world are from everybody else's perspective. And we live in our one place, but I can connect with, Oregon, or I can connect with Japan or something like this easily, right, through this screen. So there's that weird sort of doubleness too of our experiences.
Yeah, the students and I really were interested in the kind of the virtual and the online touches throughout the book, that you could feel like how it pervades and mediates and filters, but it's done very subtly, right? So it feels true to, well, maybe not always true to how technology feels. It's not that
it's not that subtle.
It doesn't overwhelm.
Well, yeah, that was another thing that consciously I wanted to avoid that subject for quite a while.
Okay.
And then I was like, well, I can't, it's just here. It's everywhere. Like, I would like to say that I'm only experiencing this redwood tree through like going to the woods and touching it and being with it. But also there's this story of this redwood tree on Reddit that I read about, and that's part of my associations now too, that I think about. And so then I just decided to, I think relinquishing control is a great tool for artists, just to say an association is probably useful somehow, even if it feels weird and random. There's something that there's a connection there that I don't yet know, I don't yet see, and I don't need to control it. I'll just let it be there and see how it weaves itself in. I've learned to trust that more and more. And so technology ended up coming into this in a way now, like it's outdated, right? Because they talk about Twitter and other things that are now not that, and it's very much about that moment in time and how, that, which was, I think, maybe like a transitional moment in technology too, for us.
Yeah, it works. But I wanted to just bring up the epigraph of the book, which sort of like feels like it kindles the book. I mean, as placed. This is at the start, right? I automatically reject any poem with the word mother in it, which is attributed to J.D. McClatchy, who I don't know much about, except that he's the longtime editor of the Yale Review. But this seems like something that sets this book off and kind of lights your fire. But tell us about, like, when did you find that? Is that something you found in place at the start, or did that motivate the work directly? Mm-hmm. It's definitely a searing, like you're almost shocked when you read it, right?
It's awful, right? But it's also sort of funny because it's such a ridiculous thing to say. I had been sitting with that quote for a long time because I heard it at a writers' conference in 2009. So he was saying this as advice to like aspiring writers. Like,
oh wow,
somebody asked him, what do you never want to see in your submissions pile, basically, like what should we not submit to you? And he was like, mother poems. I hate the word, don't ever submit to me this, this kind of thing. I will automatically reject any poem with the word mother in it. So I mean, it got a laugh, right? Because it's just an absurd thing to say. And I dutifully wrote it down. I thought, okay, I'm not going to submit my poems about mothers to J.D. McClatchy, but it bothered me even then. And then a year later, I became a mother. And so I started thinking, wait a minute, this is like a dismissal of a huge part of human experience, right? Having a mother or being one, like that somehow that is not worthy of poetry. It's not interesting subject matter. And it did not seem to be true in my own life. And so I thought, well, if I can't, I mean, I guess same as with the technology and with everything else, okay, I should avoid it. I can't avoid it, and so if I can't avoid it, I might as well just put it everywhere. And so that it wasn't my epigraph for the book from the beginning. That actually was a very late decision. But it was in my head, it was one of those things that was in my head as advice and a warning. And it was like, this might be dangerous to write about, but I have no choice, so actually, but that quote directly led to the Cento that I read to you, Mother Cento, because I thought, what is the best response to J.D. McClatchy, to an editor like this, who's like really closed-minded about this kind of poem? Well, it's everybody else who's ever written one, right? Like there's so many great famous writers, so many great poems about mothers and about motherhood. Like every famous poet has written a poem that has a mother in it at some point, right? So I went and found them. And then I thought, I'm just going to put these all together into a collage. Yeah. I would have loved to send it to him, but he died. But that was my idea. It was like, this is a rebuttal to his argument. So it did give me that poem. And it gave me the idea of the Cento too, which is this sort of collective poem.
Yeah, the centos are brilliant. I mean, in your title poem, Smother, there's a line that the students and I talked about late in it. And the smother being a conflation of smoke and mother. And in this poem, smoke is a character that sort of stands for a stereotypically idealized or heroic modern woman, right? But I won't get too deep into that poem. You definitely should read it. But late in it, you write, how would you know yourself if not inside the blur? Right. And we understand that's like all the pressures that are put on the female body and on what being a mother means. And so the Cento is sort of like gathering the smoke particulate, right, and showing all how motherhood is constructed in poetry. So it's very cool. I've got more questions for you, of course, but thought I'd open it up to the floor while we have a bit of time. 12 minutes or so. Anyone want to ask a question of Rachel? And I will bring the mic around.
I just want to ask how long again did this book take to make?
Kind of a long time. So I think I was slowed down by the fact that I had little kids during COVID and we lost a year of school. So I had like no time to myself for a year, but that also was helpful in giving me more ideas for this book. But anyway, it basically like 2017 to 23. So like 6 or 7 year period. And then it took another 2 years to go through the publishing process. So it came out in 25. So a while. Yeah.
Does sitting with a book or a building book for that long, does that help naturally with the layering, right? Because your attention kind of shifts and the complexity deepens for you?
Yeah, I think so. And the world changes, right? Like things happen. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was writing through all that time. I have a lot of stuff that I didn't include in this book.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I sort of had one idea of how it was coming together, and then it evolved a little bit, and then I wrote some other poem that kind of shifted it further, and then a new event would happen and change my thinking about how to present it. So yeah, I think time does help. I'm a big fan of revision. Revision is where poems get interesting. I think it's where you interrogate your own first thought and you find out something more interesting about what you were saying. But the other way I do revision now is just let a poem sit for a while, because if you try to revise it tomorrow, you kind of still have the same conception of how it was made, and you remember how it was made, and you're kind of attached to that original kind of first thought, second thought, third thought kind of composition. But if you set it aside for 6 months, you forget what you wrote, and then you can come back to it and look at it as like, where's the value in the words? What's interesting to me about this? What is this even about? Because I don't remember, I don't remember the source. And I think that makes you a much better editor of the work. So that's another thing that I do. And it's a very passive thing to do, right? Just let it sit for a while. It will change and grow, or you will change and grow and then come back to it differently. And so that's become kind of my revision method, is just set it aside, work on something else, and then come back to it when it is strange to you. So another sort of reason for slowness, I guess, is to kind of let yourself learn more about what you're making and then come back to the poem and see how it works with that new idea.
That's great. Yeah. And just letting things fall out of the project, a natural way to tighten. Great. Other questions?
When you're writing a poem, you have an idea for what you want to write about, but maybe sometimes you get stuck writing it. Is there anything specific that you do to come up with ideas or kind of get unstuck?
Yes, many things. But I mean, that's such a common feeling, and it's frustrating. I have lots of exercises that I'd like to try just to sort of get out of my own way of thinking, and force something else into the poem. Like I often will just give myself a rule, like, like I have to incorporate some object now. Like I think I'm writing about, whatever, my friend, and now like put an orange in the poem. Or like give yourself something that's in your visual vicinity, like I got to add the color green now, or have to do something that will just sort of make you write more strangely, make you write outside of your own sort of logical thinking. That can sometimes open up a poem. I really like the idea of the cento too, just as an exercise to bring in other voices and go find lines that you like of other people's poems. And then your job as the poet is to arrange them into something that sounds good to you. That'll teach you a lot about what you like and what works for you, and what kinds of rhetorical moves people can, or sound moves people make in poems that are appealing. So if you're sort of stuck halfway through, you can find what other poets have done and kind of even like grammatically borrow something that they've like a move that they make in the middle of a poem or something. So looking to other examples is also sometimes helpful. I like to play with sound a lot when I feel like I'm getting stuck in logic, like I'm thinking through a poem and I don't know what happens next. Well, sometimes just set it aside, do something else. But playing with sound, for example, like writing a poem that's all alliteration, or writing a poem that has to rhyme, or just like listing rhyming words, making something sound good to you and sound interesting to you, gets you away from the thinking, the conscious thinking brain that's trying to like create a meaning. I think that's the deadly thing in a poem, when you're like, but I want it to mean this, right? Like I think you can't know. Sometimes you have to just follow sound, follow image, and see what comes up. And then you're allowed to start using that logical, rational brain to kind of arrange. But if you use it from the beginning to plan, it often will get you stuck.
Olivia?
Going back to like your process of writing, I was curious, when you're like choosing poems to put into a book or like a work, like what makes it into the book, or like what do you decide to kind of keep for yourself? What do you decide to publish, and kind of how do you get to a point where you decide like these work together, or these two ideas complement each other?
Exactly those questions. I mean, that's exactly what I start thinking about, because I have too much by the time I'm putting it together. And I usually think, I mean, my own aesthetic preference is to have a shorter book, a book that, don't have any more poems than you need to have in order to make the book feel complete. So if I have two poems and they're both good, I know I'd like them both, but they cover the same ground, or they have the same kind of, not just same subject, but like they have the same kind of revelation in them, like come to a similar understanding. I do not want both of those in there. And I had that happen a few times. I wrote a lot more like elegy poems to my friend Nina than I could put in the book. In part because I realized once I was getting toward the end, I realized like, that's not really what the whole book is about. That is an important event, and it's like a catalyst, but then the whole book is about something bigger. And I don't want to sort of get weighted, towards that so much that it's not about the other things. But also, those poems were just kind of covering the same ground. I needed to write them to get over my feelings. I needed to like go through that. and they also made me find like, what's the best one? Writing a bunch of them helped me write a good one that was finally worthy of keeping. But I don't want to have 7 of the same kind of poem, in the book. So that's, ultimately that's how I chose, once I had them all. I think there's no like great efficient way to do it, but just sort of writing a lot. And then once you have them all, like allow yourself to cover the same ground again and again, if that's where your mind is taking you. Maybe they will turn out more different than you think, but then step back, and look at what you have and think about what is the 1 or the 2 or 3 that like best work together or best convey the thing that you want to get out there. I pulled out a lot of poems, and you said something else interesting, the way you phrased it, like, oh, what do you want to keep for yourself? Mm-hmm. Most poems, by the time I decide they don't fit in the book, I'm ready to discard them. Like I don't have another home for them. I don't feel like I need to keep them. They were good exercises for me. I'm a writer. I practiced. I wrote something. It doesn't have to have a home. Sometimes they've been published in magazines, so they have that, but I'm not putting them in the book, and I'm not going to save them for anything else. I was like, they've served their purpose to get me to the book. There are a few though, where I realize that it's a subject that doesn't feel like mine, I don't feel like I have the authority to talk about it in the way that I, in this book or ever maybe. So I had, this poem deals with like some sort of the sense of violence against women a little bit. It just sort of touches that like that's part of, like there's predators in nature, there's human predation on the earth, the way that we treat the planet is sort of predatory, and then there's also this like gendered predatory thing that happens, like the story that's happening in Caldor Fire, where there's, at the same time as the fire is burning, there's this guy who has killed his girlfriend in the national park, and there's a kind of hunt for him. And so I wanted that theme to come out in the poems a little bit. And I had one story that I wanted to tell. And it was a personal story, but it wasn't about me. It was about my sister. And I wrote it because I needed to write it. And I wrote it from my point of view. I wasn't trying to like impersonate her experience. But I realized afterwards, and as I started putting it in the draft of the manuscript and thinking about bringing it out, I just thought, this one's not for me to tell, and I don't need this in my story, in the book that I'm writing, in order to have that theme come through, I don't think. And it doesn't need to be like hit over the head, or I don't have to say, I deserve to write it because it happened in my family. I mean, I deserve to write it because it is a thing that I see happening in our culture, and that's enough. I don't need to like expose my family. I don't need to expose my sister in that way. And so I pulled that. And that, I think that is, there's editing for aesthetic, thematic, whatever choices that you're making for the book. And then there's editing for like your own moral center, and your own sense of ethics, and what do you as a human need to say in the world. And I think that's a thing we always have to stay in touch with too. And that's part of our process. I mean, we think of that, we can talk about this as a craft, but it is so focused on a self first. Like it really has to be true to you before it can work in the world in any other way.
Thank you, Rachel. We're almost out of time here. I was wondering if you might finish by reading the poem Permission.
Okay.
When I encountered that, I was like, oh, this is, here in Oregon, we're fairly interested in the creature that is the subject of that poem.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is about a wolf, which we don't really have around here. So it's around the Bay Area where I am. But it is a story that I heard on the radio as I was driving up the hill into our state park where I go running. And yeah, so so it's like the radio story is happening and I'm thinking about my own landscape at the same time. Permission. The 06 female gets collared and tracked, and her pack sets out in search of elk. She doesn't know she has crossed our invisible line. The ranger who put the dart between her shoulder blades can't bear watching her little blinking GPS marker glide across his screens with her babies in tow out of Yellowstone toward the hunters. He wishes he'd never found her. I hear him on the radio being interviewed as I drive up the hill toward our own conservation area, what we call the Wildland Urban Interface, domain of the mountain lion, coyote, and $3 million mansions. My shoes are laced for my usual loop. She was an exceptional mother, he says. His voice hollows with grief, knowing everything is in our reach.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful poem. It's a beautiful book. I'd encourage everyone to check out Smother by Rachel Richardson. Rachel, thank you for spending this hour with us, and we appreciate you. Thanks to Cody and Devon for running AV, and to all of you watching online and here in the room. And we'll see you for the next one in the New Nature Writing Series. Thanks,
so much
Rachel.
for having me.
Bye, everyone.